Good morning, boys and girls, and others. I am awake for the first time today, and I was kind of up here and there through the night. I had my night off, and then I slept a little bit too much yesterday during the day, and so I thought I might make some good use of my time, and I prepared a little thing. This will be part 3, I think, for Zbigniew Brzezinski's Between Two Ages. I'd like to get into some of his other work at some point. I have Strategic Vision, and then I've got some other ones on PDF format, such as the Soviet bloc and USA USSR, the Grand Chessboard. So there's several different directions I can go with Zbig. So for now, I've got Between Two Ages, and I wanted to at least make is delible a word? A delible mark on this particular book as I, sort of go through the series. I don't want to just do the first 5 pages of 100 different books. That's why I revisit these from time to time. So I'll start off with a recap of what I've done so far with this book, and then I'll move forward a little bit. And I find that with the recap, that's sort of my process of sort of distilling down everything I've already done. And so as we move forward, I'll be able to distill the book down further and further and further until we've got the essence of it just in a few sentences or a paragraph. We could sum up the entire book. But for now, we will focus on the details. And so without further ado, I will go into my recap right now. Okay, so I had to fire up my little tablet and get my boomer glasses for the occasion. So, to recap, the book seems to impart a realistic understanding of the basic forces which control the political world, and to create a collectivist political paradigm for the United States and change its role on the world stage, and to assess our political progress. Okay, so this book was written in 1970. Amidst the mass chaos and confusion resulting from information overload, Zbig steps in to attempt to show us the way. He sets himself as sort of a Hari Seldon character from Asimov's Foundation series, to be consulted in times of civilizational crisis. He had the hubris to think that world leaders should follow his lead in guiding us towards the globalist governance system, which technology was inevitably hurling us towards. So, let's think about this for a minute. Zbig was discovered by the Rockefellers for his particular talents rendered in this particular book, in which he declares himself a leader and a marshal for bringing us into world order. And that's exactly what he was then hired to do. And what the Trilateral Commission was commissioned for, it was established for him in order to bring about a particular result by the Rockefellers. David Rockefeller. in particular. As an established presidential advisor and council member to the most influential steering committees, including the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group, he considered himself, and was considered by his benefactors, to be a top authority on world affairs. He thought the people, you and me, weren't smart enough to guide our own destinies. And so he set out to guide humanity into a technocratic world order which would solve the problem of us having to try and manage sovereignty and have to make our own decisions. And his attitude was, it's already going to happen anyway, despite anybody's wishes. And so he wanted to be the one to usher us into formation, papers in hand. So, as we continue along this sort of funhouse of imaginary crises, which our ruling class has prepared for us, many of us will eat each other alive in the process, not only doing their job for them as far as depopulation is concerned, but also it gives them the perfect opportunity to step in and crack down on us and our individual liberties. And they can herd us all into a digital cage. At the risk of sounding hyperbolic, I'm actually distilling down to its essence the contents of this book that he's written, the one that made him famous. And there really isn't any nice way to put it other than a thinly veiled admission of what they're already doing, but at the time was still a mere blueprint. But this is how arrogant these world leaders are, and it's important to read the books they've written. This is not a conspiracy book by any means. These are the confessions of an actual world leader, now dead of course, who had actual power over masses of people, over nations. And there are many others. I plan on getting to more of these people because they all write books. And none of this is a secret. They like to brag about it. Zbigniew Brzezinski was from a royal Polish family, educated in the highest of institutions, with the strongest of political connections, and with the strongest of political motivations as well. And just like all of these global movers and shakers, once you have all the money, the only thing left to gain is power and influence. And so the basic premise of this book, as far as I've read it, is I'm smarter than you. I'm more powerful than you. You are incredibly stupid. Government, military, and corporations have unleashed a technology on you which you are all too stupid to handle. And so, you deserve to be gotten rid of or put under our strict control. And that's the essence of technocracy. We are rich and smart. You are poor and stupid. Now eat shit and die. Pretty much sums it up. And these are the people preaching sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a lot of it's about managing conflict, managing resources, and land allocation. And it really is a social Darwinist kind of perspective. The experts step in to manage all crises. And he's a captain of the experts. And so these dominant assholes step up on the world stage, and the only acceptable outcome is cooperation. Simple strategies make way for diplomatic flexibility in order to navigate an increasingly complex political arena. Think tanks and NGOs become a dominant factor in concocting policy. War games are constantly being played out behind the scenes and then beta tested on the masses before they finally throw their trap. So even in 1970, leading world powers were already heading up this technotronic, really means technocratic, age. The difference between the terms technotronic and technocratic is really just marketing. To brand technocratic is really kind of a hard sell. Technotronic sounds really nifty, like you're forging your way into the future. So, information becomes a crucial commodity, and the means by which people are moved along into successive phases of their plan. Narrative management is order of the day, and he says all of this. And this is why expert guidance is imperative, because manipulating people is a delicate operation. And this is where Edward Bernays comes in as an important figure. I won't go into him much here, but suffice to say, he was Sigmund Freud's nephew and a key figure in propaganda and advertising. He helped bring about later stages of the feminist movement in sort of a comical way. There's this story where he organized a bunch of women in an Easter parade to light up cigarettes at a particular time and place with lots of media coverage. And they were casting off the fetters of oppression and lighting torches of freedom. These cigarettes. And this was an effective affirmation of their liberation. But Edward Bernays deserves his own video for another time. So the experts are needed to guide the rest of us idiots through a gamut of rapid shifts of powerful influential forces in technology and development. So, an elite class who understands the real trajectory of technology and usher us along as these future shocks rain down upon us. And over time, we will increasingly depend on their expertise. And the majority of the population will be cluelessly left behind. So you see where all this is going. All notions of liberty, individual freedoms, God-given rights, all of this stuff is going away. And as immigration increases, the need for regional security also increases. In the Wanting Seat episode, the one I just did, I already spoke about the dissolution of local police departments and the institution of global and secret police. And these are the ones who will really fuck you up. Right now, local police are terrified of being branded as racist or brutal, violent fascists. The global police won't give a fuck. They will quell any kind of uprising, and they won't be standing down. And as far as any notion of any kind of clash between the elites and AI, the elites will be the ones programming the AI. Now, whether or not they win in the end is another story. There's no guarantee that these people's plans are going to succeed. We're not holding a crystal ball here. The people can stand up at any time and prevent all of this. but they probably won't. And as for the AI, it might be them versus it, but if it comes to that, we're probably already out of the picture. But we can always count on them to at least pretend to be in the know, holding on to their power for dear life. And so it's important for us at this stage to step up our knowledge. I don't know about any of you, but I can no longer partake in any of the trivialities of entertainment, sports, even music and the arts have receded into the background and sort of taken a back seat, for me anyway. And anyone who knows me knows that that's my thing. These are my specialties. Now, as we've moved forward into this particular phase of human existence, I can no longer move forward in the typical manner. When I'm not working, I have to do what I can do to educate myself and try to understand this whole machine that's working around us. I never watched the news growing up. Even as a young adult, I had no interest in anything in our government or the corporate world. That was all something very foreign to me. Like that was them. I didn't want any part of it. I mean, I still don't. But it's coming for us, whether we like it or not. So we might as well try to understand it so we can make more informed choices for ourselves, our families, and our future. We all need to have a basic understanding of philosophy, logic, systems, statistics, mathematics, science, at least geopolitics. It all sounds really boring, but there's no way around it. And this is just for us individually. How we manage on a global scale, according to this book, will involve our nations dissolving and melding into one another. And so our local social institutions will break down and we will become more atomized as our government becomes larger, more consolidated, solidified, and more centralized. Cities will become more congested as we either become dependent and draw into them on our own accord or get herded into them by the control structure, these dense population centers. In the name of CLIMATE acquiescence, our allotment for travel will be curtailed. And cities will become more congested and crime-ridden, as violent crime will be less prosecuted in contrast to political crimes and thought crime. And we see this happening today. Dudes are pushing women in front of subway trains and promptly getting let out, while Donnie T gets a lengthy trial based on a glut of spurious minor indictments, many of which rarely get prosecuted in most cases. Owen Schroyer gets to rot in solitary confinement for 2 months for daring to deny the legitimacy of the election on a podcast. Enrique Tarrio gets sentenced to 22 years in prison for his role in a non-insurrection he wasn't even at. Meanwhile, a Capitol police officer shoots an unarmed woman, killing her, for allegedly breaking a window and doesn't even get charged for it. So I looked it up on Google to see like what part of her body she was shot, because there was some discrepancy there. At first I had heard that she was shot in the throat, and then that she was shot in the chest, and now, according to the DOJ website, it says she was shot in the shoulder, and that killed her. I never heard of someone dying from a shot to the shoulder. But when I Googled it, all the results led me to left-leaning news sites, and they were all the top picks. I mean, as you scroll down, eventually I got to like the New York Post, which isn't exactly right wing. It was the only news site, as far as I knew, that was actually representing the story of the Hunter Biden laptop during the 2020 election. So something doesn't sit right as far as these stories. Another time I had tried to look up Stuart Rhodes and only found the left's perspective on him and what he's all about. And I mean, I'd heard stories that he was possibly a Fed. I don't think that's the case now because the guy's been put in prison. I think Dinesh D'Souza had said that. But I just think it's a little bit strange how Google only sends you to left-wing news sites. I know there's not a lot of right-wing news sites, but there's plenty of alternative media out there, and it doesn't send you to that, even if it's stuff that's on YouTube, which is their company. So it's just a little bit odd. And in those stories that were about Ashley Babbitt, all the jargon that described the event describes her as being part of a mob, not a group of people, storming the Capitol, an insurrection, to overturn the results of the election. And as all of this video footage is being released, it becomes more and more clear that this official narrative doesn't really hold up. I mean, how the hell does somebody commit an unarmed insurrection to begin with? I just remember as it was happening, I was watching it as it was going down, and the media had already had their narrative spin on it the moment it was happening. And I was just watching it thinking to myself, like, this is all bullshit. Like, this just really, it stinks like FBI propaganda. And that's pretty much what it is. What they were saying about it and what I was seeing wasn't matching up. I mean, the whole thing was really a Reichstag fire. I mean, it was a false flag event, for sure. It's a psyop. An opportunity for the Democratic Party to demonize everyone on the right, all the supporters of Donnie T. The more you learn about the history of the FBI, the more you begin to understand their modus operandi. And history definitely rhymes with these people. There was another supposed right-wing demonstration that went down over a year and a half ago. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was like something for Trump, or like some bunch of Trump supporters getting together. It was supposed to be this big planned event, and nobody showed up. It was just really a bunch of feds that ended up like bumping into each other, and like they were like trying to arrest each other, but there was no real Trump supporters at the event at all. It was just a total hoax. Okay, so back to these 15-minute cities, right? And this isn't something that Zbigniew Brzezinski particularly talks about in his book, but he sort of alludes to it in the whole idea that like the global village becomes this sort of city. It's like city life on a global scale. But really what he's kind of doing is he's kind of showing or illustrating sort of what our smaller, our micro level societies are going to be like. And he just describes it as being congested and overcrowded, crime-ridden population centers where we're constantly surveilled, controlled, stuffed into little dormitories with minimal personal belongings kind of thing. And so it evokes the image of a 15-minute city. But he doesn't call it that. But I'll refer to it as that because other futurists have spoken about this, and now it's being talked about out in the open by groups like the World Economic Forum and, what is it, like the Young Leaders Group and all these other spin-off groups that they basically don't keep it a secret. I mean, it's already out. It's not a secret because they brag about it, because they think they have the power to pull it off. And I don't think that they do. I think that we still have the power to stand up, but I just don't really see it happening because there's so many dupes out there, especially on the left, that are supporting the establishment because they think that it's going to benefit them, and it's not. So these 15-minute smart cities will basically be like a sort of Google barracks placed inside of a giant Costco, where we will be certainly all asses and elbows in the main causeway. Sort of like a giant shopping mall, complete with zombies and everything, just like the Dawn of the Dead. And this was sort of foreshadowed to some degree in Asimov's Prelude to Foundation. I brought up Foundation earlier with the Hari Seldon vault and Zbigniew Brzezinski's face being superimposed over Seldon's face. But the planet Trantor from Prelude to Foundation was nearly completely covered in domes, like containing just a massive planet-wide system of causeways, office complexes, escalators, elevators, moving walkways, fountains, indoor plants, skylights, air conditioning, circulating bad breath. It just smells like one big sweaty ass crack, like John's Incredible Pizza. There's just one outdoor complex. It's like a campus, and that's where the Emperor lives. But the real ones here on Earth, not the planet-wide Cinedomes Theater complex of Asimov's imagination, but the actual smart cities, would just be like really pretty-looking prisons, with just enough living space to take off our shoes and get out our little toothbrush and fold our little laundry and pull the bed out of the wall and sleep all by our lonesome. So it'll probably be kind of like Logan's Run, where you're not allowed to leave. Well, we'll be totally interdependent anyway. And I'm not even making this up. All the future elite assholes all write about this stuff in their little books. We will be as racially integrated as humanly possible. Humanly possible. We will be as racially integrated as humanly possible. Even on the individual level. We will all be racially mixed. As anything but intermixing will be taboo. It's like when you take the turkey, the mashed potatoes, the cranberry sauce, the gravy, and just sort of stir it up into like a Thanksgiving smoothie. That'll be us. Consensus and identity will be homogenized over time, and we will begin to look more alike, thanks to strict eugenic policies and social conditioning. According to Zbig, we will see the end of nations in an evolution of political process, with all our democratic ideals fading from memory, the republic long forgotten. Of course, Zbig won't get to see it. Darn. He's like Moses, prevented from entering into the land of Canaan, ushering us into a place where he's forbidden to go. It's just as well. We're probably better off without him. People will be paradoxically closer in geographic location, but alienated socially. Culturally lost, the person standing next to you is strange and unapproachable as an alien from another planet. Just a series of standard, minimal, necessary protocols designed to keep us wary and distrustful. Personal allegiances long forgotten. Once this indoor gulag is established and instituted, law enforcement takes a back seat, unless the government structure becomes threatened. It's more like management and human resources at this point. Aaron Koenig, in his book, Freaking Crisis Proof, he talks about corporate townships where you go and sign a contract with terms of service to live in a city governed by a board of directors that's run as a private corporation. What could go wrong there? It's kind of like the island in Childhood's End, run by the hippies as sort of an independent breakaway civilization. Of course, they weren't independent enough, as was revealed when the Overmind showed up and captured the souls of all the children. So here, back to the 15-minute cities. Personal sovereignty, property, money as we know it, even self-defense and self-determination are no longer applicable. So-called political affiliations are corporatized. We would pay with social credits for memberships in communities, a set of privileges for where we can eat, sleep, and what and with whom we communicate. There will be a low-key state of perpetual war with dubious enemies about whom we know little. Sort of like 1984. Oceania is at war with Eurasia, and we won. But wait, no, we were never at war with Eurasia, and so on and so forth. So they're not ridding us of other nations, but rather just controlling the population. We will rarely interact one-on-one. All social interaction and relationships will be mediated by groups. As far as what's left of our foreign policy goes, conflicts in developing nations are largely ignored by the major global superpowers, unless their squabbles begin to affect the bigger players. In the same way that violent and petty crime in the neighborhoods will be ignored by local law enforcement, unless, of course, these mild disturbances in some way threaten the stability or encroach on government property. So in our own history, after World War II, certain factors inhibited war between major countries, such as A, the advent of dangerous biological and nuclear weapons, B, the formation of power blocks and alliance systems, and C, the increasing cost of modern warfare. Nuclear weapons have forced participants into a position of passive restraint. Yet sporadic violence breaks out on the peripheries of these major global confrontation. Thus, we have our proxy wars like Ukraine, Vietnam. Our nuclear weapons are the only factor which prevented us from directly going to war against the Soviets throughout the Cold War. These weapons have created a novel system of deterrence. Our government now opening up the borders is a way of turning up the heat on the population. It strains our sense of nationalism when every person on the dog trail is speaking a different language. Social cohesion is lost, and soon the dog trail itself will become a thing of the past. As the nation states begin to go away, international politics become more and more interdependent. The separate civilizational eras depicted earlier in this book are arbitrarily delineated. The landmarks are perceived in hindsight. Our global political protocols will be determined and enacted less by committee of human interaction, but more through corporatism and the AI which comes along with it. And so, technocracy, technopoly, and therefore global governance is inevitable, and according to Zbig, should be guided precisely and deliberately. So now, picking up where we left off in the text, we are at the section called The Onset of the Technotronic Age. The advances of science and technology have become the most influential sources of change for man and society, especially in the more developed countries. But now, with the proliferation of the internet and virtual worlds, this is beginning to even out to a degree. People in developing nations can take advantages of social media, streaming services, mobile apps, and cryptocurrencies. Towards the latter part of the 20th century, many Western writers began to prognosticate on the probable civilizational trajectory on which technology would take us. Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, Timothy Leary's Infopsychology, in addition to the rest of the futurism genre, and a host of mainstream techno-thriller and sci-fi movies. The main distinction here is drawn between the zeitgeist of the Industrial Revolution and the Technotronic Revolution. Society, as we remember it before the internet, is never coming back. The post-industrial society is becoming the Technotronic society, and political systems are changing as well. We'll be hard-pressed to hang on to any real semblance of a constitutional republic going into the future. The collectivist, corporatist technocrats have already dug in their heels, and now their wealth is consolidated more than ever, in addition to advances in the behavioral sciences and propaganda, not to mention ideological fortifications within the public education system. So what is a technotronic society? Zbig describes it as a society which is shaped culturally, psychologically, socially, and economically by the impact of technology and electronics, particularly in the area of computers and communications systems. And these advances in technology and communication would alter our values, mores, and social structure. So he drew all of these conclusions by the end of the 1960s. In the industrial society, technology was more or less a means to expedite and improve production. Social consequences were a mere byproduct of this concern, an afterthought. But now, scientific and technical knowledge spills out into every area of life. And we'd better believe that at some point, governments, corporations will take advantage of these developments to seize control over every aspect of our lives if we allow them to. The important thing is to stay vigilant and remember the spirit of our nation's founding. Gradual encroachments on our personal sovereignty are no accident. Even mass media and the aforementioned sci-fi thrillers prepare us and ease us into the acceptance of some of the more nefarious goals. So, with this acceleration of scientific and technical knowledge, hopefully our own cognitive processing can keep pace and maintain a capacity to quickly calculate complex social and technical interactions. He mentions biochemical means of human control. We can assume by this he means performance-enhancing drugs, herbs, or hormones, but it can also be interpreted as mandated biochemical interventions by the government, as in controlling the masses through cybernetic upgrades, or even changing the genetic makeup of a human, a transhumanist agenda. If we assume the former, we'd have the availability of drugs which interact with our natural neurotransmitters in order to enhance our awareness and cognitive functioning, thus increasing our available choices and deepening our commitment to a chosen conscious direction for change. Like how we can start surfing the web and then go down a particular rabbit hole, which can fundamentally change our perceived model of the world. Add to that biochemical enhancement, which can focus our attention as we travel into these various thought channels, propelling us further and faster. And as we grow dependent on these accelerated processes, the social importance of our own intelligence and ability to switch tracks and keep up with current developments increases. As we increase our ability to decipher patterns of change the need to integrate these changes is heightened. And this is assuming the drugs have a stimulatory effect. On the other hand, certain drugs can distort or limit our perception, leading to manipulated or altered manifestations of experience. And this increases the importance of our philosophy, epistemology, and even theology, our political views and affiliations, our social networks and community interaction. Here we see science intensify the relevance of values. But he also says that science, with a capital S, demands that our values be cast in terms that transcend the crude ideologies of the industrial age. I'm assuming here he means either highly differentiated political identification or eschewing traditional religious affiliation altogether, like the science-killing God mentality. I guess that's where fuckers like Yuval Noah Harari come in. So then science here takes the capital S again, like as Ben Shapiro would say, to science. I think we can assume Brzezinski wasn't any kind of traditional Christian or Muslim or anything like that. Most of the futurist, globalist, transhumanist technocrats aren't. And so the next little section of the book is called New Social Patterns. American mathematician and philosopher Norbert Wiener contributed work relevant to electronic engineering, electronic communication, and control systems. He was considered the originator of cybernetics, the science of communication as it relates to living things and machines, with implications for, among other things, systems control and the organization of society. Of course, his work heavily influenced Gregory Bateson, who developed the double-bind theory of schizophrenia and also served in the OSS. So in this section, comparison is made between patterns of life which are emphasized in the agricultural age, the industrial age, and then the technotronic age. The onset of the industrial age was heralded by such innovations as the compass and advances in navigation, gunpowder, and printing. Likewise, the technotronic age is heralded by developments into space, utilizing rapid computer calculations beyond the scope of the human brain, nuclear physics, television, and long-range communication. It's plain to see, since 1969, we have seen much further expansions into cyberspace and quantum computing, transhumanist innovation, etc. Here we begin to see economic, political, and social revolutions blossoming, for better or worse. I think back then we didn't see any of this as scary. In the first case, as production begins to shift from agriculture to industry, muscle power is replaced by machine operations by individuals. And then, into the technotronic age, industrial employment yields to services, with automation and cybernetics replacing human machine operation. We have our relationship between employers, labor, and the market in industrial society, and simply whether we are employed or unemployed. All we had to do was stay employed. Now we deal with obsolescence and whether or not we get automated out, possibly having to switch careers, whether we have to work more and more hours for less and less material gain, if any at all, beyond our basic living expenses, whether we ever get a vacation, whether we ever get upward mobility, a retirement pension, or have to hold 2 or more jobs. Also, whether we are able to maintain our psychological health or spiritual well-being. Okay, I'll do one more. Our education is our point of departure for social advancement. Social reformers in the industrial society emphasize this. and how we break down barriers to entry for everyone. I've always regarded libraries as an often overlooked tool for advancement. You've got public libraries, even in the hood, but their local staff is generally bored stiff, just arranging and rearranging the books, trying to coerce people to come in with various promotional raffles and drives for the community. All the while, people cry and complain that they didn't receive a government stipend to go to school, or if they didn't get accepted into a particular university. So, formal education, our public school system, usually available only for a limited time before one has to go and work somewhere full time, usually consisting of rudimentary literacy and arithmetic, peppered in with some job training and hopefully some critical thinking skills. So, for the Technotronic era, schooling becomes more universal thanks to online learning, with advanced training available to most people via video platforms, etc. Then the emphasis moves over to marketing of skills and finding talent. Here we have our LinkedIn, Indeed, Instagram, etc. Our quality selection. Sort of entering our preferences into a funneling algorithm in order to pinpoint skills, etc. Education becomes a lifelong pursuit with frequent updates and refreshers. Or we can just buy a bunch of crypto and hope for the best. That's what I'm doing, anyway. We can spend all our time and energy cultivating skills and educating ourselves, dedicating to a well-planned path and trajectory. Or we can just buy crypto and wait. I'm doing both. Both. Have you ever known somebody who puts an L in both? Which one are you going to do? Both. Are you a bother? I'm a bother. Well, I'm either going to wind up in a tiny coffin apartment with fold-out furniture, eating microwave meals of processed shit, with a cozy little suicide pod and a toilet in the middle of the living room. Or I'll be rich beyond my wildest dreams and imagination, owning vast tracts of farmland. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so I'll end it here for now, and that concludes this little section of Between Two Ages by Zbigniew Brzezinski, and we'll pick it up again later. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the books I've been reading, and I've got some books here for show and tell. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of them. But what have I been reading? Well, I finished reading the Bible all the way through, finally. I guess now I can have a block party because I finished the Bible. Yeah, it only took me 40 years to read it all the way through. Through most of my life, I just kind of read here and there. I'd pick it up and read a few pages of Psalms and then put it down for 2 years and then pick it up and read, like, Matthew or, Genesis. These are usually the ones that people read, right? But I finally got through the whole thing. And now I'm reading it again. And I'm on Leviticus. So, a few chapters, maybe 6 chapters into Leviticus. And it's cool because it's, a few of the books I've read more than one time. And what I'm noticing is that as I read through it again, especially with the Old Testament, some of the names of, the places, the kingdoms, the kings and all this stuff, like, a lot of it, like, is more familiar now. Like, when you read through Numbers, it can get pretty tedious. It's almost like reading through the phone book. You're reading these long, drawn-out genealogies of, people that you don't know anything about. There's no reference to a lot of these people and places. But also as this, Israel-Palestine conflict has, been going on, I've studied the maps a little bit more, gone through and you can kind of put some things together and understand, that most of this took place in this area of the world. It's just kind of a small area. Some places aren't even mentioned. Like, you don't really hear much about India in the Bible. I think that I had kind of cracked the seal on some of the Apocrypha. And in one of the apocryphal books, I saw a reference to India, and it really stood out to me because I was thinking, wow, that's really weird. I don't remember India ever coming up in the Bible at all. But it does come up in the Apocrypha. You don't really hear much about Afghanistan or Pakistan, I don't think. But, you mostly hear about, the country that is now Israel and Egypt and the Sinai area and stuff like that, Lebanon. And I guess also some of Jordan as well. But other than that, you don't really hear about too many other locations. But you've got Rome and Greece and stuff like that. Turkey, I think. Is Turkey in there? But anyway, it's been good to read it a second time. And now I've got all these different Bibles now, and so I'll read from different ones. I'll read one book from the NIV, and I'll read another book from the King James, and I'll read another book from the English Standard Version, and I plan on buying a New American Standard Version pretty soon. And then I got some commentaries, and here's one that I started reading, and this is John MacArthur. He's a Calvinist. But he's a guy I like to listen to. And this book is called Standing Strong, How to Resist the Enemy of Your Soul. And it seems like it is some sort of self-help book. But so far, as I've been reading it, it's talking about basically the fall of Lucifer and how he was cast down to earth and all this. All the biblical references, that allude to that event. And so it's kind of interesting, actually. It talks about the demons and the angels and the hierarchies and all this stuff. So what else? One book I was reading recently, I don't know if I have it here, was I was just reading The Parasitic Mind by Gad Saad. Here it is. And it's a book that mainly talks about woke liberals on campus. And there's some pretty amusing anecdotes in here. The Parasitic Mind, Gad Saad. Let's see if there's a picture of him in here. There he is. He's a Lebanese Jew. And it's woke culture in America from his perspective. He actually is from Lebanon, like his family. They were refugees from Lebanon, where they escaped execution by the skin of their teeth. And he's a college professor, and his area of specialty is evolution. He's an evolutionary scientist, but as it relates to consumerism. And so that's a pretty niche little, thing that he's in there. But he gives an evolutionary perspective on a lot of the woke shit, and it's pretty cool. It's funny as hell. He just tears into people, and if you've ever seen his Twitter activity, he gets into it with. He's a scrapper. He calls it a honey badger. And so I was reading some of that, about a little more than halfway through it. Another book I've been reading recently, Philosophy 101. It's just one of these 101 volumes. Real easy to read. Because when it comes to philosophy, I need something easy to read, because I was trying to read Hegel. And reading Hegel is like having a bad dream. Have you ever had one of those dreams when you're sick? Like if you have a fever? and you have a dream that you're like riding a bike up a steep hill, but the dream seems to last for hours and hours and hours, and you're just doing the same thing. Yeah, so it's kind of like that. But yeah, I'm just kind of I'm trying to lay a basic foundation for philosophy, because I've learned to appreciate that. You know, I listen to a lot of Jay Dyer stuff, and he comes from a philosophy perspective. And just listening to him, like, a lot has given me an appreciation for philosophy and an appreciation to want to learn it. And to study logic and fallacies and stuff like that. I think it probably improves your ability to debate with people you might disagree with. And he's really good at that. So what else do I got here? This is a book which I'd like to read a little bit more. I've only gotten started on it. And this is Collier Horowitz's biography of the Rockefellers. Look how thick this thing is. Okay, so this is the authorized biography of the Rockefellers. And I look forward to reading that. I've read quite a bit of David Rockefeller's memoirs. Got about 100 and something pages into that. I always skip around. I mean, if it seems like I don't get very far in books, it's because I've got a lot of different books that I work through. And I work through them a little bit at a time. Another book I've been reading recently is Fyodor Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. And this book has gotten really funny. Like, there's a lot. Dostoevsky has some pretty, like, serious subjects, but he treats them in a very humorous way and in a very insightful way, which really gives a good understanding of psychology. If you are somebody who's interested in psychology, Fyodor Dostoevsky's books are very... There's just a lot of little gems in there that really give you a good idea of how people think. And there's always these really intense situations that happen with usually very poor people. And it gives me an appreciation for the things that I have, because I don't have much. I have a low-wage slave job, and it doesn't pay very well. And I don't have much money every month, but, you know, I have just enough money to pay my bills and throw a little bit into crypto every month or every 2 weeks. And crypto's going good. The market's picking up. Bitcoin's at about 38,000. And first Bitcoin ran, and then we had a nice little run of altcoins. And I've got quite a bit of altcoins, and so that's looking good. I've been focusing my own portfolio mainly on trying to build my Ethereum bags. So now that it looks like we're going into a bear market, I need to get my Ethereum. And already Bitcoin has gotten beyond the point to where I'm really trying to, like, buy a bunch of it now. I think maybe I'll just get a little bit here and there, but right now I'm focusing on my Ethereum bags, and I think I'll continue to buy Pulse Chain and Hex. And so I'm not giving anybody any advice, because you don't want financial advice from me, because I'm a poor boy. But hopefully one of these shit coins will pay off and hit the jackpot, right? So, Brothers Karamazov. Let's see what else we got. I already went through these. Here's one I finished not too long ago. Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. Good book about transhumanism, written by a globalist technocrat, Fabian socialist type guy. He's, I would say that he is one of the intelligentsia influencing the globalist movement. And so his depiction of transhumanism in this book, as it involves a spiritual force emanating intergalactically, which sort of came to our Earth at a point where we were threatening our own existence through nuclear war and stuff, and the alien overlords showed up to sort of keep us in check for a little while and hold us down. And we interacted with them to some degree, and they looked like demons. And the idea there is that they had visited Earth hundreds of years earlier, maybe 1,000 years earlier, and they were the inspiration for our depictions of demons and devils, because they had that look. They had the little, the little spiky tail and the horns and the red-looking skin. And so the idea is that all our occult practices and like occult depictions of demons was inspired by the aesthetic brought by the overlords on their first visit. And so in the end, the overmind, which controlled the overlords, came to our world, and it sort of infected our children. They we're coming for your children, right? So that's what they did. They came for our children, and they took over their minds, and the children became like a sort of a golem type hive mind, and they began stripping the earth of all of its resources. And so they kind of like, I think they were taken away in a ship, and then they were brought back to sort of mine the earth of its resources before the earth was finally destroyed. And it sort of just crumbled into itself, like almost like an earthquake kind of thing. But the earth just came apart. And it was interesting the way that went down. So I think I've done an episode or two where I talked about this book, and I'm going to go into it a little bit more in the future. So there's that. Here I've got Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Possessed, or alternately titled Demons. And I would like to get into this one. I mean, I've already read it, but I will do an analysis of it because it's one of the best books I've ever read. And again, insightful psychological insights. Insightful psychological descriptions. Okay, how about that? And some great descriptions of people living in poverty. And some great descriptions of people at the time living in opulence. And so it gives a good dichotomy there. Okay, this one, I've already talked about it before. Little bits I've read out of it. Tragedy and Hope, big old mammoth. I am right now about 180 pages into it. I'm going to start analyzing some of this. I know Jay Dyer already did the whole book, but I will do it in my own way, because the way I analyze books is a lot different from the way he analyzes books. And so I will go in and do some minute detail. And that book is full of notes, and I will probably transcribe some of the notes and just take it bit by bit. Here's a book I haven't really done much reading in yet. I sort of cracked the seal. It's called Critical Race Theory and Woke Culture: America's Dangerous Repeat of China's Cultural Revolution. And so far what I've read, he's talked about how he came from China. He talked about how his father was murdered, and how he witnessed the Chinese Maoist Cultural Revolution as a child, and how what he sees right now in woke culture is sort of a reflection of the Cultural Revolution that was going on in China, and how it's very similar, and how America is in danger of repeating what happened with the Maoist Revolution. Here's a nice thick book. I like these big thick books. This is Henry Kissinger's White House Years, and this is part one of a series. So he likes to talk, huh? Here's part two. I just got part two, and this is called Years of Upheaval. And there he is, Mr. Kissinger. So, yeah, I really wanted to read this one, but this is part 2, so I want to read part 1. There he is standing there, all studly with his studly vest and his 3-piece suit. So yeah, I can't wait to get into that. I really have been collecting Kissinger's books. I'm developing a geopolitics library with the Brzezinski stuff. Now with Kissinger, I got Ray Dalio's book, Changing World Order, which is sort of a hybrid between economics and geopolitics. And then I've been reading George Friedman as well. And so that's kind of what I've been getting into a little bit. I've got this book is one I ordered called Holmes Lasky Letters, which is Oliver Wendell Holmes and Harold Lasky. They're this is book 1. There's actually 2 volumes. The second volume I have the PDF of, but I wasn't able to get volume 1 online for free, so I bought the book. So yeah, it's the correspondence, the letters between John Holmes and between Oliver Wendell Holmes and Harold Lasky. So it kind of reminds me of a lot of the political debates I have with my brother. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay, the Fabian Socialism and English Politics by A.M. McBriar. And this is, so far, has been giving a history of the Fabian Society. And that's very interesting because the Fabian Society grew into a lot of put it to you this way. When you read David Rockefeller's memoirs, he went to the London School of Economics. And while he was there, the London School of Economics is basically a Fabian socialist school. And so it's an economic school that's run by Fabian socialists. But it also had a lot of the proponents of the Austrian school. So that is kind of interesting. So he actually had one-on-one time with people like Friedrich Hayek, is that his name? And Hayek, yeah, the guy who wrote Roads to Serfdom. And he studied also under, what's the guy's name? There's 3 main Austrian guys. The guy who wrote Human Action. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. But yeah, he taught there as well. And so that was one of his professors. But Fabian socialism became sort of the main sort of collectivist ideology of the global elite and the New World Order. So it's kind of important. I've got the book, the Milner-Fabian Conspiracy, or the Fabian-Milner Conspiracy, by Johan Ratiu, and I look forward to getting into that. I'd like to do an analysis of that, but I've only read like the introduction, so I don't know if I will sort of analyze it as I'm reading it. Usually I read a book first and then I analyze it. But I got another book here, Marxism, Philosophy and Economics by Thomas Sowell, and it's very dense. I'm about 30 pages into it, not including the introduction, but yeah, he talks about the Hegelian dialectics of Marxism, and he goes really into it, and it's pretty heavy stuff. Here I got The Transmigration of Timothy Archer by Philip K. And I've always liked PKD. I think he's a great author. I've read about 30 of his books. And this is the last book that he read, the third book of the Valis trilogy. And yeah, I'm only about 50 pages into it, so I haven't gotten very far. I only get 50 or 60 pages into any book, and then I start something else. Here's one I haven't started reading yet: The Philosophy of Aristotle. Like I said, I've been interested in philosophy. I'm flirting with philosophy at the moment, and so I look forward to reading Aristotle, because Aristotle is a cornerstone of philosophy, and without any understanding of Aristotle, you're going to be lost. So here's one I started recently, and I read most of it. Actually, it is Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. Not most. I read through The Ghost of Christmas Past, so I'm up to the point of The Ghost of Christmas Present. So I read Marley and The Ghost of Christmas Past, and it's cool. I like it. It's a good story. It definitely makes one feel guilty. If you're not the kind of person that celebrates a lot of holidays, it's like, wow, man, I really need to step up my dad game here. Henry Kissinger's Diplomacy. So this is another big old thicken that I am looking forward to getting into. Only about 40 pages into this one. But yeah, geopolitical stuff. Here's an interesting book I found at Half Price Books. It's called Dialectical Phenomenology by Boloch. And this was a library book at one time, but it's a real nice volume. It's an old book without a dust jacket. And I found it in the political science section, and it's got little subheadings on different parts of the book. Dialectical phenomenology, unity of subject and object, reflexivity and grounding, dialectic and critique. What does this one say? Rule 2, treat individuals as grounded in an historically specific form of life. I look forward to reading this, but I haven't started yet. Here is the newest Bible that I bought. This is the Legacy Standard Bible, which was sort of a project that was spearheaded, I think, by John MacArthur. And the idea was to give as close a rendering, like direct translation, between English and the languages in which it was written. And I've found that I really do enjoy reading this volume. It's a hardcover, which is weird because most Bibles are really flimsy and flexible, and I don't like that as much. I kind of like the hardcover version. And I like the way it's formatted. It's got real nice formatting. And there are no references in here, but there are subheadings on some of the chapters and verses. Not every verse, but maybe every 30 verses or so there's a subheading. Here is The Long Day Wanes. The Long Dick Damon Wanes by Anthony Burgess. And it's subtitled A Malayan Trilogy. And it takes place in British colonial Malaysia in the 1950s. And it's interesting. How far am I in this one? 112 pages. And it's a funny story. It's really funny. And it's the same writer who wrote The Wanting Seed, which was the last little video that I made. And one day I'll do one of this. I don't want to mix them up too much, though, because I'm only like 6 chapters into my analysis of The Wanting Seed. And so I'll wait a little while and then I'll start The Long Day Wanes. Here's another one I was reading recently. Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. How far am I in this? I am 145 pages into this volume. This is volume 1 complete, but I have an abridged volume and I'm about 400 pages into that. Or maybe, no, not quite. Maybe 250 pages into that one. And so I guess I would, if I would be at the point of probably the middle of book 2 of the extended version. And that one is, it's really hard to read. It's not that it's difficult. What's difficult about it is that it's just heavy material. When you're reading it, you're very weighed down by a lot of the human cruelty that happens in the book. It's kind of like when you read Rise and Fall of the Third Reich or anything about the Nazis and the Holocaust. It weighs you down spiritually and mentally. So I wouldn't recommend reading Nazi history for any length of time. You want to take small bites of that shit because it's just very depressing. And so that book is actually written with a little bit of a sense of humor, even though it's very, very dark um, events that he's describing. And here we got Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I love this book. I read it about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, and I started reading it again. And I'm just in the introduction on my second go through. I probably will do an analysis of this at some point because I love the book so much. Here's a history book I read in college. Give Me Liberty by Eric Foner. This is volume 1. I have volume 2. But we only went through volume 1 because it was a one semester course. And most of the students didn't even read the book. But I did. I actually read the book out loud onto a voice recorder and listened to it at work for about 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4 months. Well, however long it took to take the class. I think I took that one in a summer class, so it wasn't quite that long. But Eric Foner, he kind of gives history from a little bit of a leftist perspective, but you know, you get the picture. It's like you read it and you're like, you'll read parts of it like, you know, they all just can't help but be some sort of activists in some way. And so you get a little bit of his activism in there, but it's not as bad as reading Howard Zinn. I had a debate with some guy on social media the other day, and he said I didn't know anything about history. I'm like, dude, you have no idea. Like, the guy probably had his own, he probably learns his history from memes on the internet, you know, like the guy probably doesn't even read books. So the guy has no idea how many books I read and how much I read and how much of my time is dedicated towards reading and how much older I am than he, and have read probably so many more books and so much more of history. But I mean, I don't claim to know a lot about history, but definitely more than this fool. So Homer's the Iliad. This will probably be the next video I make. I did an analysis already on this, on a section of it anyway. And I did read some of my earlier notes from the first part of the Iliad. On, I don't remember what episode it was, but I had one of my early episodes. I think it might be the one where I talk about living in Europe, maybe not. But I do go on my notes a little bit from this. And so, yeah, my next video probably be the Iliad. Here, okay, this is Between Two Ages. Maybe I'll just slice out this part and put it in the beginning. So here's the cover of Between Two Ages. The cover is no cover. It actually is a hardcover, but there's no dust jacket, and it wasn't meant to have one. This is actually the packaging. That's what it looks like. So Brzezinski's Two Ages, Between Two Ages, and there it is. There's the cover. Earlier in this video, I referenced this book, Freaking Crisis Proof, by Aaron Koenig, a Dutchman, and it is about Austrian economics and cryptocurrency. So yeah, he talks about Bitcoin, and so there's a lot in here about Bitcoin and blockchain technology and the possibilities for the evolution of finance through digital assets and the sort of lifestyle of a crypto trader and somebody who lives the crypto lifestyle. Someone like myself, except someone who's probably been doing it longer. I've only been in the crypto game for about 2 years now, and so I got in at the top of the bear market and rode the whole thing down. So I lost all the money that I put in at the beginning, and I was down 90% on everything I put in, and I just built up my bags through the whole bear market. So now I'm on my way back up, and I'm looking forward to those mad gains that I'm expecting to get from from the crypto bags that I developed over the last 2 years, and it should be pretty good. I mean, I would be surprised if I didn't at least change my life a little bit financially, and we'll see. Actually, I did sell some Bitcoin when Bitcoin ran up at about 35,000. I sold a little bit, and I actually spent it. I bought something. I bought something that improved my life a little bit. It felt pretty good. I won't talk about what it is because we're on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't like that shit. And so we'll just leave it at that. Penguin history of the world. Nice thinking. Okay. This one, of course, I'm only on like page 33. And I'm still in like the Paleozoic era or something. Yeah, it's talking about like early. I mean, this goes back. This history goes back to. Well, it just describes like evolution. our going from, basically describes us as being rodents, okay, or like little monkeys. But yeah, I don't know if I buy into all that shit, but I don't think that I do, honestly. But I take it all with a grain of salt. I read this stuff, and I read about what their narratives are, and I can either choose to believe it or not, right? Just like anybody else with any other piece of literature. And here I've got, this is one I got recently, The Intimate Papers of Colonel House. This is volume 1. I got volume 2 in that box. So there's volumes 3 and 4, but we'll see if I get that far. If I end up reading both of these volumes all the way through, then I'll buy the whole set just to get 3 and 4. Because it's really hard to find 3 and 4 just by themselves. Unless you really look online, and you do a search over time. And so we'll see if I end up finding that. But so far, actually, I was surprised with this book. I thought it was going to be boring. And it starts out really interesting. It talks about Colonel House's childhood, where he was actually raised during the Civil War, and he lived in like the kind of Wild West where people were just going around shooting each other. And so if you he grew up in Texas, and basically in Texas during the Civil War, post-Civil War days, if you disrespected someone, they just blow your head off right there, at the local grocery store, or the local food and drug market, or in local bars, or wherever they happen to be. People just walk around with guns and just shoot you if they didn't like you. So, and it talks about how he got into politics, and he had a friend growing up whose dad was a politician, and he helped out with his campaign, and he, it talks about how he comes up as sort of a mover and shaker in the, and he also moved to DC when he was a teenager, dropped out of college, and during that time he got involved with the federal government and was in there, and so he was sort of the, according to some of the secret history or whatever you want to call it, conspiracy genre, Edward Mandell House is considered to be sort of the liaison between the global establishment, like the Council on Foreign Relations and that kind of thing. And actually, they Council on Foreign Relations, I don't think was until 1920, but there was other globalist entities, central banks, and he was sort of put in charge of Woodrow Wilson. I haven't got to that part of the book yet, but he basically was sort of the middleman between the New World Order and Woodrow Wilson, and he was to sort of keep Woodrow Wilson in line. Woodrow Wilson, one of the conditions of him becoming president, it was that we do go into World War I, which is part of the secret history, because according to mainline history, that is, more popular and what is commonly taught is that Woodrow Wilson was against the war. But he knew all along, according to the conspiracy world, that he knew all along that he was going to take us into World War One, and that was a plan all along. That was a condition of him being put in. He was placed into the presidency, and the way that that was accomplished was there was William Howard Taft was the incumbent, and he was running for his second term, and Taft himself was an establishment guy. His father was one of the founders of Skull and Bones, but the problem was with him was that he was a conservative and he didn't believe in globalism, and so they wanted to bring about globalism, and that is where the League of Nations comes in. The League of Nations was not his original idea, although he had globalist tendencies, and he had an affinity for that ideology, for globalism. And so that was why he was placed in the presidency. And the way that they placed him was when he was going against Taft, and he was going to run against Taft, and of course Edward Mandell House was placed in charge of his campaign. And as he ran for president, what they did was they kind of resurrected Teddy Roosevelt, who was, by all intents and purposes, a conservative, and they ran him as an independent. So it was Taft versus Roosevelt versus Woodrow Wilson. And what happened? Of course, as you might guess, the conservative vote was split between Taft and Roosevelt, and so Woodrow Wilson won the election. And so the same people who bankrolled Wilson's campaign also bankrolled Roosevelt's campaign. And that's how Woodrow Wilson became president, and that is how the globalist establishment was able to control their puppet president. He was basically the prototype for Joe Biden. He was like Joe Biden, the original. And so he was their puppet president. And so what did they accomplish with him? They accomplished the Federal Reserve. They got into World War I just like they wanted to do, so that they could bring us into, hopefully, for them, a world government. And so that's what the League of Nations was designed to do. But Congress wouldn't have that shit. And so Congress voted against it, and we didn't join the League of Nations at that time. Of course, later the UN was established, and out of that came NATO. And so that is part of the history. And so the globalist establishment, they got 2 out of 3 things that they wanted through Woodrow Wilson, probably plus a few other fringe things, which I'll finally probably learn about once I read these books. And yeah, it's the intimate papers of Colonel House. So it wasn't written by Colonel House. It was written by some people at the university who had all of his intimate papers, and they crafted the narrative according to the papers. So we'll see how much truth comes out. We'll see how much they try to salvage his reputation and how much they throw him under the bus. We will see. This other book, Introducing NLP by O'Connor and Seymour, I've read this one before, and it gives an overview of lots of different NLP concepts and strategies and tactics and how it's used, and it just gives a description of what NLP is all about. It's kind of a comprehensive description, and I've read several other books aside from this. I have most of the Richard Bandler, John Grinder library. I've got most of that stuff. Frogs into Princes, Reframing, Transformations. I've got the new Richard Bandler version of Transformations, like the new Transformations. I forgot what it's called, but it's all about hypnosis. And so a lot of the techniques in this book, it's interesting because as I was learning about NLP back in the PUA days, and I was into that, and I was into using NLP as a mode of accentuating the learning process in that field and in many others. I used it in college. And one of the things you learn in college and take psychology classes is a lot of NLP comes from academic psychology. And so I found a lot of the same things were reinforced when I went to college. And also, a lot of MK Ultra comes out of NLP because Gregory Bateson, who was, I don't know if he was OSS. I think we went through that earlier in this video. I think Gregory Bateson was OSS, and he was involved in, he was one of the pioneers of cybernetics, and so he was involved in MK Ultra. Gregory Bateson was, and then he sort of, there was a connection made between Bandler and Grinder and Gregory Bateson. And if you read the book Turtles All the Way Down by John Grinder, which I'm going to go through that as well. I already have a little bit prepared for a video about NLP, so I've already started one, and that'll be maybe after the Iliad. I'll do the NLP video. But Bandler and Grinder, they collaborated with Gregory Bateson, and he wrote the introduction to Turtles All the Way Down. And so I'll get into a lot of that. Maybe I'll get into some of my own personal skill set that I developed and tie it in with the PUA stuff as well. Because now they've got the red pill movement and, like Rollo Tomasi and all those guys. And that's like the new lights. Those guys are the new generation of pickup artists. And they're, the whole manosphere. I mean, I'm not into it. I've watched some of those guys' videos, people like, Modern Life Dating and all those guys. And I come from the old school. I mean, I actually have corresponded with Mystery, Eric von Markovic. I've chatted with him several times. He used to send me little sound bites, describing certain things about, I'd ask him a question about NLP, whether he was into it or not, because I know he had his whole real social dynamics thing. And I would send him messages and be like, hey, so do you ever get into NLP? And he would message me back, yeah, man, I've got all that shit mastered. It's just automatic part of my routine. So yeah, I'll do a video on NLP at some point. And then this is Changing World Order, some more geopolitics, economics by Ray Dalio. I've been listening to some of his YouTube videos. I think I listened to the Lex Friedman interview the other day with him. And I'm looking forward to getting some of the Mearsheimer books as well. I haven't got any Mearsheimer's books. But I listened to his interview with Lex Friedman as well. And I think that's it. I got some other books lying around, but I don't want to go too far into any of this. So yeah, I mean, that's just trying to keep you updated on some of the stuff I'm reading and what I've been thinking about, as far as literary exploits go. I do have some other projects I'm working on. Let's see, I already did the Wanting Seed. I already got Catherine Austin Fitz. Yeah, I don't know where the rest of my Iliad material is. I've got notes for the Iliad, but I've only found one page. There it is. I got it. So I got about 5 pages in my notebook on the Iliad, and I'll probably have to do a little bit more work before I put that video together. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and like, subscribe, and share. And go to the Deep Tank website. My shirt, this is one of our shirts. You can go to the Deep Tank website. Don't go to deeptank.com. It's deeptank.net. deeptank.net. Okay, I couldn't get the .com because somebody from the fucking CD manufacturing place, I think, snaked the freaking domain, the .com domain, before I could get to it. And I'm pretty sure it was somebody from the CD manufacturing company, because it happened at the time that the CD was out for manufacturing. Like when I sent, after I sent the files to the CD making place, during that month that it was in production, somebody bought the .com domain for my fucking band, and I had to get a .net instead of a .com. So go to deeptank.net and order Deep Tank CDs. You can order. We've got cool backstage pass looking things like laminates. We've got what else? We got shirts. We got hoodies. Christmas is coming up, so yeah, get a hoodie for somebody. Order some Deep Tank stuff. I got so many different T-shirt designs. Actually, there's a bunch of them on the website, but there's a bunch that aren't on there. And so, if you go on my Facebook page, you know, I've got a bunch of different T-shirts. You know, there's T-shirts on there that, if they're not on the website, what you can do is send me a message, tell me which one you want, and then go order one that is on the website that is corresponds to the same price. And if you message me, I'll message you back, let you know which one to order, let me know which one you want, and I'll send the one you want. So I'm pretty flexible. So yeah, just hit it up, buy some Deep Tank merch. I need the money. All right, have a good one.